So I decided it was time to put down a new floor between the garage and the main building. Now, nothing was done to this ever since the house was first made in about, I think, mid-50s. And as you can see, they're all in horrible worn. So yeah, I decided to rip it all out, give it and put down the new floor. There was a lot of old construction waste that was kind of left in there, a couple of bags of sand on top of it, and the slabs had been laid down, which meant over time they really moved. And this was going to be the brick layout that I was going to use. It's called basket weave, I believe. So yeah, I set about cutting some of the old slabs and reusing them, which I kind of regret because they're very heavy and big, as you can see, and my disc cutter was not big enough. The blade was quite small, so it didn't cut through all the way. These are about 5.5 centimeters, I think. So yeah, I had to flip it around, cut it again. And even then, I couldn't just easily break it off. I had to use a sledgehammer to split it in two, which meant I was left with some rough edges, so I had to clean those. So yeah, it was a very time-consuming process, which I kind of wish I didn't have to do. So yeah, here I decided to splash some water on the sand as I went on. I thought it would just help settle the mix better. And this was going to be my main frame that I was going to work, and I was going to lay the bricks according to this. So I had to make sure that it's perfect pretty much, which was very time consuming, and it was the first one that I'd ever laid. So it did take quite some time. Now I am at an age in my life where I get extremely excited about starting these DIY projects, and then in order to reward myself when I'm finished, I buy myself power tools. I don't really know what that says about me, but I guess there are worse places to be in. Okay, so this bit was quite important because the bricks that I was using were 20 by 10, and the design that I was going for meant that it was going to be 80 centimeters wide as a whole, and I just really wanted to avoid having to cut the bricks, so I made sure that I find out where 80 centimeters bang in the middle of this path is going to be, because the measurements were a bit odd. And as you can see here, I'm like 10 centimeters short. That's what she said. So I thought drawing the line is going to be really helpful because it gives you visual representation, so then I know exactly the area I'm working within. So yeah, the line was there, and then I was back to cutting slabs. So obviously with all the rubbish that I took out, it meant that I had to replace it with something to make sure that the ground isn't too low, which meant that I had to use a lot of cement and sand. But it's not a bad thing. It just means that it's going to sit really compact and hopefully stop it sinking over time. And I really made sure that I pack out under the slab, under the edge of the slab as well. And this was my first row of bricks. So hopefully it's just a matter of following this all the way through. Now obviously using bricks meant that each brick was going to cover a very small surface, and it just meant that I had to check over and over again to make sure that the ground is nice and level, that the bricks are nice and level. Now I don't know if you can see, but the bricks have got these little like things on the side that stops them from sitting tightly against each other. This leaves a space for grout to go in, but sometimes, to be honest with you, because it was just a few millimeters off, instead of having to take out the slab, cutting it and putting it back in, I just got rid of one or two of those, and it meant that I had an extra few millimeters space. I eventually realized using a stool was going to be so much easier, and my lower back really thanked me. Another thing that I realized was making sure that if I put the brick down and it sits level straight away, or almost level, I picked it up, I poured some more sand and cement down, and then put it back down, because I always prefer to hammer it into place rather than it sitting straight away, because if it sits level straight away, it means that a couple of times it gets stepped on and it's going to sink. So I always make sure that I hammer it into place, and eventually you get the feel for it, I guess, so you know exactly how much material to use. You run your hand across it and you realize whether it's level or not. But obviously it's always good to carry on making sure that I'm using a spirit level. So I eventually ran out of slabs that I was using, the old slabs that I was using, because some of them were really tough to pick up. So I ended up smashing it with a sledgehammer and not thinking about this stage. So I ended up going and buying some more slabs from. They were thinner, they were smaller, and they were cleaner, obviously. So I kind of wish I had used them from the beginning, but my aim was to not only try and save some money, but also reuse some of the material. Otherwise I would have just had to eventually get rid of those slabs by taking them to the tip or something, and frankly I didn't want them to be sitting around the garden for too long. But yeah, I eventually ended up using the new slabs that I'd bought. The problem with that was that because these are cleaner and newer and they're slightly lighter in color, which meant that later on I had to buy a wire brush and clean the old ones as well to get them looking closer to these new ones as well. my camera did run out of battery eventually, and unfortunately I was too tired and too cold to care, so I just carried on, and it was eventually done. One of the things that consumed the most time was the bed of concrete that's in the doorway. That was very untidy, so I had to use the angle grinder to cut a clean line, and then because it was so thick, I had to use a chisel and hammer just to break off any excess, any bits at the bottom, get a nice clean straight edge, so then I could have a slab sitting nicely flush against it, and that was one of the most time consuming things, but I'm so glad I did it because I ended up with a very, very neat and tidy finish. This was my finished product. Now it was time for grouting. I found this step extremely therapeutic. I've seen people just throw down a bag of grout and then brush it around, but I thought this way it's going to give me a better result, because at the end, the better this step is done, the longer it's going to last, and the better the bricks are going to hold against each other. So yeah, I did that. It took very long, but it wasn't an issue. Yeah, gave it a good brush, got rid of all the excess, and then I just got a watering can, splashed some water on top and brushed it, and I repeated that step several times for the next few days to make sure that it's that the cement gets as much water as it needs. And also brushing it meant that I was going to get rid of all the old grout that was sitting on top of the bricks. And this was pretty much it. It was a long process, but it was fun. It was worth doing, and the end result is not too bad. As you can see, the difference between the colors of the slabs is visible, but obviously eventually cleaned that and it looked much better. And there it is. Here's the final result. It didn't turn out too bad. It was my first go, so I'm not going to be too harsh on myself. But yeah, thanks for watching.